If you look at the history of the Congress never sort of came into existence as a force of struggle. It came into existence as a force which would cooperate, which would work with the colonizers, and which would eventually move towards some sort of self rule and finally Swaraj. So, deep within, and who were the stalwarts of the Congress? So, if you look at most of the stalwarts, they were educated in Britain, they were barristers, they went to schools, colleges, universities. Those of which were set up to sort of create the human resource to keep the British colony going. Now, given this backdrop, to expect the Congress to be an anti colonial force would be unfair. So, the Congress, frankly, was never anti colonial. Even after 1947, the very decision to stay on with the Commonwealth, there was absolutely no compulsion to do so. It was not a requirement, but we chose to do so. And I could give you several such examples. So, to expect the Congress to be an anti colonial force or to usher in a post colonial thought process in India would be unfair. If you look at the inheritance which we have, our inheritance, whether it is the symbols, whether it is the, I could give you numerous examples. By me as part of the beating retreat program. Why was that chosen? And why did it continue for so many years, so many decades, till it was thrown out last year? And there are several such instances. And obviously, that percolates down to history writing. And the whole idea of the state sponsoring history writing by itself, I find it obnoxious. And I don't think the state should be sponsoring history. And in our country, the way it happened was that it became history writing became a state project. So it became a part of the rewriting of India's past to sort of sanitize it and make it compatible with India's present as conceived by Mr. Nehru and others. And that is where we come from, really.
Yeah. Thank you, Kartikeya. I think the very fact, the discipline of history, first of all, is, something that is constantly open to revisions, reinterpretations, reimaginations, retellings. A famous American historian had said that, what people did in the past is not preserved in amber. Every generation looks back and drawing from its own experience tries to illuminate the past in the way it can illuminate it. So every work of history has been termed as an interim report. And that is also the intellectual challenge of the discipline, because if everything that was to be known is already known and written, then there is no job left for historians to do. So the larger, philosophical question of should there be a rewriting of any history? Yes, there should be a rewriting based on, factual excavations, new documents, archival sources, which, the historian comes across. specifically with respect to the freedom movement. I think a movement which lasted for so many decades, or perhaps some would even argue centuries, because if we are looking at just our struggle against the British as the freedom movement, or do we stretch it way back into the centuries, where for every invasion, maybe right from the Arab invasion downwards to the Turks, the Mongols, the and then of course the Portuguese, the Dutch, the French, and finally the East India Company. There has been a series of resistances, bravery, which has ensured that at no point of time till the British came, the whole of India came under the control of any one particular power, by and large. So this pushing of the envelope of what exactly the freedom movement itself means, I think that also is a new reimagining of the term itself as to how do we want to look at that. Particularly when we come to the colonial struggle against the British that we had for over 200, 250 years, there also the kind of version that is fed to us today is in my view, a very, very sanitized, very linear, very simplistic, monochromatic kind of a version, which rests largely on the version that the ruling party post-independence, the Congress, wanted us to believe. And that has been one of, there's just been a non-violent movement spurred by which the British finally, got fed up of all these movements and just decided to pack up and leave. And so that is the dominant theme that that is presented to us, which we all the time subconsciously imbibe right through popular media, whether it was the film Gandhi by Attenborough or whether that famous Bollywood song De Di Hame Azadi Bina Khadg Bina Bhal साबरमती के संत तूने कर दिया कमाल. So that these kind of popular imaginations, I think, puts a blanket on several other movements which were not necessarily non-violent in their nature. They were armed rebellions. They were also tribal revolts from different parts of India, right from the late 18th century of Tikha Majhi and Thalakal Chantu. Then there was Tirot Singh, Tatya Bhil, Alluri Sitaram Raju, whose anniversary we're again commemorating this year, Rani Gedinilu, Helen Lepcha, several people in different parts of the country, the tribal communities, the Adivasis, the Janjatis, their rebellion, the sannyasi revolts, all of these do not, and of course the armed struggle. So right from 1857, which we've termed as the first war of Indian independence, and not the Sepoy Mutiny, from then on till 1946, which is unfortunately even to this date called as the naval mutiny and not as the last war of Indian independence as it should be, there has, in my view, been an unending chain of violent uprisings against the colonial power. And if one dispassionately looks at the various milestones in the manner in which the British granted concessions to us, right from the Morley Minto reforms in 1909, the Montagu-Chelmsford in 1919, the Government of India Act of 1935, or ultimately freedom in 1947, all of those were preceded by, bloody revolutions. Before the 1909 Morley Minto reforms, you had the entire first phase of the, revolution in different parts of India, particularly Bengal, Maharashtra, with the Anushilan Samiti, with Abhinav Bharat, with people like Shri Aurobindo, Veer Savarkar, so many others in that era. And that led to this, one could say that this forced the British to give the first phase of concessions. The second phase, the 1919, just after the World War, you also had the Gadar movement, which was transcontinental in its nature. Lala Hardayal and so many others who were part of that, Virendranath Chattopadhyay and so on. And the 1930s, you had the heroics of the HRA leading to the HSRA, Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, Rajguru, all of that. leading eventually to the 1935 Government of India Act, and all of their aspirations culminating in the efforts of Rash Bihari Bose, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, and the Indian National Army. So if one looks at the trajectory of Indian independence through this lens, it is a completely different narrative that one looks at or observes. And so I think the time has come now when 75 years have elapsed, where we look at it in a very dispassionate, unemotional manner, and assess that what were the actual factors that got India her freedom. Because as is famously known and reported, post-independence, when the Prime Minister of Britain, who signed the transfer of power to India, Clement Attlee, had come to India, and he had this conversation with Fani Bhushan Chakraborty in Calcutta, who was the High Court judge and also the acting governor of Bengal. And he had asked him, why did you leave India in such a haste? Because they were not expecting Britain to leave. And Clement Attlee very clearly mentioned that it was the efforts of the INA of Netaji Subhash Bose which ultimately caused them to leave the country in fear. And also when he was pushed further to ask about the impact of the Quit India movement and so on, and Clement Attlee had very smugly said that it was minimal. So I think the role of a historian is to assess these different factors. And I think as a nation, it's very important for us to know what were the foundational reasons why we became free. At least 75 years later, we have every right to know as a nation, as a civilization, as to what were those fundamental factors which caused our liberation. So I don't see this as any attempt of in a negative connotation of rewriting, but a reassessment, a reevaluation of history, which is a natural, normal course with the discipline